Hello, everyone. My name is Oleg Kagan, and I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator with LA County Library, and I welcome you to Work Ready, Returning to Work. And now I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Work Ready program. Work Ready started in December of 2020 with the purpose of helping people get a job, improve their work situation, and plan a more sustainable career path. We do that in two ways. We lend out laptops and Wi-Fi hotspots for 6 week loans out of 20, soon to be 27, library locations. So people get an access to a computer and the internet. And then number two is we provide virtual events just like this one on a range of work-related topics, from basics like resumes, cover letters, and interviews to deep dives into various careers. So also programs like this, Returning to Work. Now you can see any of our over 50 classes we've done in the past at any time by checking out the work and career playlist on our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/LA County Library. And I'll post a link to that in just a bit. The Work Ready program is made possible due to funds provided by the American Rescue Plan. Now, if you'd like to learn more about our virtual events or in-person events, not just work-related, but all different topics, you can head over to lacountylibrary.org and click the events link at the upper right-hand side. If you want just virtual events, you can hover over that and the little virtual events drop down will come up. You click that, you just get virtual events, just like Zoom events like this one. If you want all events, in-person and virtual, you can click on that events box and you get events that are virtual and from any of our 85 library locations. Now, I would also like to tell you what we have coming up next week for Work Ready, and that is Work Ready, Exploring Job Search Websites. Next Tuesday, March 14th at 11 a.m. I'm going to post a link so you can register for that. And what you're going to learn there is what different job search websites look like, how you can filter for jobs that you're looking for. Maybe you'll learn about a new job search website or a job resource that you can get from the library. I'm going to post that in the chat right now. And at the same time, I'm also going to post a link to our work and career playlist. So as I'm doing my introduction, you can peruse the programs that we've done in the past, and there have been quite a few. All right. And of course, this presentation is being recorded. So if you miss any part of it, if you need to leave early, if Zoom dumps you out for some reason, don't worry. You're not going to miss anything. You don't have to take notes at a rapid clip. You will get this presentation via video on YouTube, and I'll send the link out as a follow-up email next week along with the slides from today's presenter. Okay, and now I would like to introduce to you the host of today's program. She is a work-ready stalwart and career coach. She's presented with us on this very channel on topics such as what's new with resumes, networking. She's done a Ask Me Anything as a career coach and several more. I highly enjoy working with her, and she always provides great information for our job seekers out there. Her name is Liz Moeller. Liz, the stage is yours.
Well, thank you, Oleg. This is just always such a treat to be back in the library when we're not really in the library, we're virtual. And so I kind of missed the in-person, but ever since COVID hit, I was asked to start doing a bunch of workshops online. And initially I resisted, and then Oleg said, oh, come on, the people of Los Angeles need you. So I'm back. And today I'm really excited because I am introducing one of my colleagues, Jennifer Rizzotti. And Jen is also a professionally trained and certified life and career coach. And she's dedicated to helping her clients define success on their own terms. So she really likes helping individuals, but she also works with organizations. And her coaching practice is a lot like my practice because she's very values-based. So she really emphasizes the whole person. And her style has been described as energetic, highly engaging, yet she's also very methodical and straightforward. So since 2020, she's been working exclusively with private clients, navigating career changes and going through their stages of life. And what she's noticed is that she works with clients who have spent the first half of their lives checking off the boxes. They grow up and they do all the right things and they go to school and they graduate, they get good grades, they maybe go on to training or maybe go on to college, or they start working, maybe they get married, maybe they have kids. And then at whatever stage they're at, something shifts and they're ready to say, what's next? So she has a program called Your Life Method. And she really coaches clients around that curious, challenging question of what's next. So I'm super excited to kind of pass the baton to Jen, but I'm also going to be right here alongside her, adding commentary and pulling out the questions that you, the live audience, have. So I definitely encourage you to put some Q&A questions into the Q&A. And as she's talking, if you think of a question, go ahead and put that in the Q&A, because we can make it a little bit more conversational. And Jen and I are going to take a break at about halfway so that we can give you guys a chance to reflect and pause and put some questions in the chat. And then we'll jump in, because returning to work after a gap is a tough one. So I'm going to turn it over and let Jen introduce herself and throw her slides up. But I'm so excited to have her here, and I'm excited to have over 145 people with us live. So excited to get started. And Jen, take it away.
Thanks, Liz, for the kind introduction. I'm just going to get my screen up here, so please let me know when you can see it, Liz. It's a pleasure to be here today partnering with you and Oleg on the Work Ready program. And just want to be sure, let me know once you see those slides. Should be good to go.
Good to go.
So thanks so much again. It's a pleasure to be here. The story of how I know Liz is actually a really great example of networking, and it's very relevant to our conversation today. So I just want to take a brief moment to share it before we get started. I'll put my bio on the screen for you as well. But Liz and I met about 10 years ago, and I had just moved from Boston to Los Angeles. And the first thing I did was try to grow my network locally. So I joined several professional organizations. One of them was ATD LA, which is the Association for Training and Development at that time. I think it's since been renamed, but they had a mentoring program. So that's actually one of the reasons that I got involved. And this is something to think about if you're looking for a job as well, is ways to find a mentor. So I joined the program. Liz was assigned, for my benefit, it was very fortunate, she was assigned as my mentor, and we continued to kind of work together over the years. Later on, when I wanted to start my own coaching practice, Liz really became my coach and I became her client. So we kind of shifted our dynamic there. And ever since that time, she's really been pivotal in helping me grow my business through speaking, and going from her mentee to her client. Now we're colleagues, and I'm her coach, proud to say I'm her coaching associate. It's really a great example of how networking reaps benefits over time. So it's finding those people, doing what you want to do, and genuinely investing in those relationships. So I'm really pleased to be here and partnering on this initiative together. Our agenda today is jam-packed, as you can see. So we've got actionable strategies and tips for returning to work after an employment gap. That gap may be long, it may be short, but we will teach you how to overcome that gap. We're going to begin with an overview of the 6 steps that I use in my practice on how to overcome a gap. And then we'll spend the rest of the first session really exploring each of these 6 steps. We'll take a couple minutes to do a reflection exercise before we go into our first break. And that's really just to kind of get your wheels turning about things that come up. You don't need to take notes unless you want to. You will get a copy of these slides, so you don't need to write down what's on the slides. But if you want to make notes of things that come to mind or that come up for you, please feel free to do so as you would like. We'll pause for questions at about the halfway point. It might be between 25 and 30 minutes in. We'll get into some of your questions about your particular career gap and how to overcome it. And then the second half is really going to be why these gaps happen, what we can do to boost our confidence, and how we can get that job. Any questions, Liz, before we get started? Any comments?
Just, we're eager to get started. And I think a lot of people are in a situation where maybe they're parents or moms or caretakers, and it's been really a long time, maybe 20
Mm-hmm.
years since they've worked.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to dig
Mm-hmm.
in and hopefully circle back with some suggestions and ideas about those long-term gaps. So
That's
good.
great. I love that. Thanks for mentioning that. And we'll definitely speak to the long-term gaps. And any gap is a gap. And certainly the long-term gaps do feel a bit more overwhelming to overcome. So we want to speak to that overwhelm as well. So we're going to jump right in here. So this is the overview of the 6 steps. And again, you're going to get a copy of these slides, so you don't need to write the specifics down. But this is really how to re-enter the workforce successfully. And though I've arranged these steps in a flow chart, if you will, kind of one leads to the next, this is not a linear process. And anybody that's been through a career change or gone back to work realizes that this just kind of happens when you're ready, where you are. So though these is arranged in this way, I just always say, begin where you are. We'll talk about each of these in detail over the next few minutes, but just as you go through this journey today, you're going to have to ask yourself at some point, what do I value in terms of my career? You'll need to talk to people doing what you would like to do, very important networking. You'll need to think about who might be able to help you and help you find jobs. You may want to get back in touch with former colleagues. Some of them who've kept working might be in a position to now hire you, etc. So that's really important to reconnect. At some point, you'll also need to update your resume and social media, LinkedIn, wherever channels you're on. And the last step, which might end up being your first step if you know what you want to do, is to really do an honest assessment of your skills compared to what you'd like to do. So we're going to dive into each of these 6 steps. Now, remember, I've labeled them as step 1 through step 6, but this is not linear. So just begin where you are, and whatever your first step is, whether that's resume or honest assessment of your skills, that will be your step 1. So the step 1 I put for first here is the values assessment. And this is actually because it's the first request I make of my clients when they come to see me for career help. It's probably, and this is just my opinion, my professional opinion, it's probably the most important slide of our workshop today. I hope you'll take a few minutes after the session to complete your own self-assessment. And you'll have really the instructions here on the slide to go from, but I'll walk you through it right now. It's a brief exercise. It takes 5 minutes. And it's really important in any job search, especially when you've been out of work for a period of time, because you've changed. Your priorities have changed. Your responsibilities may have changed. You may have different family obligations now or different financial circumstances now. So remembering that this is going to change throughout your career and throughout your lifetime. And that's completely normal. So the first thing you're going to want to do is ask yourself, what do I value in terms of work or job? And I want you to actually list these things, that what matters to you. To do this assessment, you probably want to have a pen and paper. You could do it and send an email to yourself as well. But I want you to really create a wish list of the 5 to 10 priorities for your job that matter to you. Now, remember, you may not find a job that meets all of those criteria. That may not be realistic. But some of these things might be, for example, a work from home or hybrid setting. It might be a minimum salary requirement you want to go back to. The company culture might be important for you. The company impact or mission statement might be important to you. So I want you to come up with, and again, you can do this after the call, but I want you to come up with at least 5 wish list items that really are what you value. After you have your items, it's very simple. You just rank them. What's my number 1? What's my number 2, 3, 4, etc. So depending how many items you have, and really it's the top 3 to 4 that matter. For instance, I'll share as a personal example, I work from home right now. I run my own practice. It works for me. But if I wanted to go back to what I did for many years, which was kind of the corporate setting, right? I was in an office 5 days a week until the pandemic. And I didn't have that flexibility that now I have a family. I have my first son. So for me, childcare, some flexibility for childcare, even a corporate daycare on site would be like a real number 1 for me. So right now, personally, any subsidy for childcare or some allowance for childcare would probably be like my top 1 or 2 wish list item. And if a company didn't understand like childcare was, something I need to worry about at this season of my life, it actually might make or break my decision to accept that job. So it's going to be different for everybody. I just shared that as a personal example, because that's really what it would take for me to return to corporate America, if you will, is I need some sort of flexibility in my life right now. The list that you come up with, it will change as you go through your career, as I mentioned. So it's really important to periodically do this assessment, as you go through your career, and really take a couple of minutes to reevaluate where you are with regard to your key priorities. And the reason I want to restate this is because if you don't even take 5 minutes to reflect on what matters to you, you don't really know what you're looking for. And one of the questions Liz or any career coach will pose is, what exactly are you looking for? And if you don't take time to really outline that for yourself, I promise you, you will not find it. You will not find what you're looking for. So I really want you to, if you take anything away from this workshop, I know Liz and I are both values-based coaches, but it really is important to do something that matters to you. And again, that may change. There may be times where it's out of necessity you have to do something. It may be, at some point your life has changed. But this is something you really need to walk yourself through before you're really starting your search. So for me, it kind of is a step one, but you could certainly tackle some of these other steps before this one if you feel comfortable. The next step, and this could be your first step if you're a natural extrovert or you like to get involved, is really to find people doing what you want to do. It's all about the network. Liz and I think, shared the same opinion here that people get jobs, resumes don't. So you probably will still need a solid resume, and we'll talk about that, but it's the network that is going to help you get that interview. It's the network that gives you a foot in the door. It's probably the network that even tells you that the job exists. There's a hidden job market, which a lot of people aren't aware of, that, it's really how jobs are, how you get the jobs. Very often a referral, a foot in the door, this is all happening because of your network. So you really need to talk to people doing what you would like to do and genuinely invest in those relationships. And just like I shared at the beginning of the workshop, Liz and I, we have a long-term relationship now. Networking does not pay dividends overnight. It's very much a long-term investment, if you like to talk stocks or numbers, but it reaps benefits over time. So what I encourage you to do is look back at networking, people you've worked with in the past or you share common interests with. Those people could be someone that might help you get a job today. All of a sudden, a coworker from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, if they've continued to work relatively consistently, they very well may be in a position to not only hire you, but help you get in the door. So it's really important to reconnect with people that you had those common interests with. And it's not everybody. You don't need to, reach out to everybody you've ever worked with and start, hitting up everybody. It really is the genuine connections that you had with shared interests, shared values, and all of that. Because those people are going to kind of become your mentors. At the very least, they'll become supportive people for you to go through this job search process with. So I encourage you to do some networking. Since 2020, it's never been easier to do it virtually. I mean, what we're doing right now, this workshop is an example of networking. Feel free to find me on LinkedIn or find me after the workshop. I mean, it's all where you're getting involved, whether that's your running club, your book club, your social groups that you may be a part of. And those are online as much as in person these days. So there really is ample opportunity to network in whatever social spaces you are in. That brings me to the next step, which is really who can help you. I kind of touched upon this a moment ago, but beginning with your coworkers you used to work with, if you've been out of touch a while, then start with your friends, start with your family, start with alumni from your school if they have a local alumni group. Again, whatever social spaces you are in, those individuals are the people who know you, they trust you, they like you, and they want to help you, right? So find some supportive people and let them know, I'm looking for a job or I'm looking to get back to work. It will also be nice to have references at some point, most likely. So if you're kind of reconnecting with people and it's been a while, it's nice to just have those conversations first about what you're looking to do before you then ask them maybe for a favor, etc. So we talked about LinkedIn, online workshops such as these, really a great way to network. I would personally share via social media status. I think a lot is just happening, whether you're on Facebook or LinkedIn, people see those updates. And if it's relevant to them, they will respond or they will send you a direct message. I would always encourage you to be specific about what you're looking to do. And this is where it helps to have a little bit of the research about what you'd like to do next clear in your head. So when you talk to people, you can ask them specifically, hey, I'm looking to do project management, or I'm looking to do learning and development. Be specific about what you're asking for so they can kind of think about someone in their network who might be able to help you. But it would be good to reach out in whatever channels you're comfortable. Phone, text, email, social media, have regular conversations. So when you reconnect with professionals from your past, for instance, former colleagues, find out where they're working, find them on LinkedIn, get in touch, have your elevator pitch ready. And I don't want to say have it ready, have your elevator pitch really down. And this is even more important when you've been out of work for years, 5 years, 10 years, or a longer gap, because we do lose confidence. So much of our personal identity and self-esteem really is wrapped up in our job, because we're somewhere during the day, we're productive, we have a purpose. When you take that away, it's no wonder we feel, a serious drain to our confidence meter, right? So I want you to feel confident when you share your elevator pitch. And this includes what you've been up to during your gap. And I'll just restate for our participants, since there's a lot of folks on here today, an elevator pitch is essentially your 60-second bio. It's your personal brand. It's what you share with people. If you were riding an elevator from the first floor to the 10th floor, you have about 60 seconds. And what would you tell that person in the elevator if they were the CEO of the company you want to work for, right? So you need to have your bio down, especially the period of the gap. If you're not confident speaking to your experience or having that narrative, find someone who can help, a coach, a mentor, some sort of supportive person, because you'll need to really project confidence when having these conversations around your career. Even if you don't feel the confidence yet, you may need to kind of fake it till you make it, and that's perfectly acceptable. We'll discuss ways to boost your confidence in the second half today, but I want you to feel comfortable sharing your story and knowing that your story and how you spent your time away was valid. And we'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. So step 5 is your resume. This is a big one. I know LA Library Archives has a ton of info on this, and Liz has facilitated great resume workshops for the libraries as well. So I would encourage you to look up some of those in the archives. Returning to work, this could be your step 1, your resume. And the reason I say that is I like the values, but maybe the step 2 personally is the resume, because it also gives you that boost of confidence when you realize what you used to do and how good you were at your job, and just it kind of gets your wheels turning about your what you bring to the table. I would recommend, if it's been a while, refreshing the formatting. There's so many free templates. And again, we're not going to spend too much time on the resume today, but there's so many free templates with Google, with Canva, online. You can pretty much just plug your stuff into a template and make it look really, really fresh and sharp. Of course, update your contact information and make sure that, most importantly, it's relevant. Anything old, outdated, I encourage you to take that off. And I see this a lot. I do resume edits, and the biggest thing I ask people to let go of is really that old glory. And we all had old glory, and it's usually like something you did in college, or some triathlon you did, or there's something that maybe is great, but it's not relevant to the job you're looking for today. So if you were on the dean's list in the 90s or even the early 2000s, it doesn't need to be on your resume, in my opinion. There's things you've been doing in the working world, in the professional world, that are much more relevant, and I would encourage you to highlight those instead. So kind of let go of the irrelevant stuff, let go of the old glory. I know it's hard, we've all had them, and instead focus on your experience, your education, your skills. And in some ways, you may want to add an objective statement if you've had a long gap there, because it lets people know, hey, I'm aware I have this gap. This is what I'm looking to do now. I went back to school to do this, or X, Y, Z. We'll talk about this a little bit more in the second half. But ultimately, the resume is honestly, it's a formality. People tend to glance at your resume, so you really want that first and second bullet point to be really sharp, but nobody, in my opinion, will read your resume. And when I used to do hiring, you don't have time to read everybody's resume. So just remember, it needs to look sharp, it needs to look clean. You want to hit those key points, but for the most part, it's going to get a cursory glance, and it can really just be a formality. The foot in the door is going to come through the networking. But having a clean resume and feeling really put together is going to give you that boost of confidence as well. There's no exact formula. It's not a science. Your resume is your personal brand, and I encourage people to make it their own. It should feel like it reflects you. It reflects your style. But there's some great guidelines, as I said. So check out the library archives. And if you're stuck, hire someone to help you, because it certainly can give you that boost of confidence if you feel you're putting your best foot forward on paper, as well as on social media. If you update your resume, it kind of updates your LinkedIn and everything at the same time. So it's a really good process to go through as part of the search. And lastly, as we come into step 6, this is a fancy way of saying gap analysis. So assessing your skills for what you want to do versus what you currently can do is really gap analysis. And that's a term that gets thrown around, but really it's just a comparison of the two, where I am and where I need to be. You can do this on your own, and I certainly would encourage you to do this to get started before you begin your job search. But you'll basically look at the qualifications of a job or a job title or a job posting and say, okay, it requests these 10 things. Maybe I need like 6 or 7 of them. How many do I have? If you only have 2 or 3, you're going to need to get in touch with, where's the gap here? How can I fill the gap? Do I need to take an online course? Do I need to get licensed to do this, particular job, or certified? Do I need a master's degree? There's a lot of things you can kind of do on your own. But again, the networking, I really encourage you to talk to people doing what you would like to do, because those people actually have the jobs and they've gotten where they need to go with this particular industry or field. So talk to people doing the job that you want and find out how they got their start. And between your own research and hopefully talking to a few people in the mix of it, right, it should become very clear what you need to kind of fill that gap. And you may decide, you know what, I want to be a physical therapist, but now I need a PhD because it used to be a master's program, which was 2 years. Now it's a doctoral program, and I can't, I don't want to make that switch. That's a really big commitment. So you kind of have to know, again, this is back to what you value, but are you willing to maybe give up some resources or time or commitment? Where are you in terms of those 3 things? Because it could take a lot to get where you want to go. And you may say, okay, I'm going to reset my course. I don't need any more education. I feel I'm educated enough. I'm going to pursue a different track. Okay, but that's just a kind of a part of the process that you go through. So I know we've covered a lot. We're kind of reaching the halfway mark of our workshop, and I want to keep us on time today. We're going to take 2 minutes, just 2 quiet minutes before we answer some questions, because I have a feeling your wheels are turning, and this is all very unique to each individual on the call. And of course, unfortunately, we can't address everybody's unique situation today. So I want you to take a moment. We're going to just answer one of these questions. And remember, you're going to get a copy of these slides, so you don't need to write all of these down. But in the next 2 minutes, before our pause, I want you to look at these questions. I'm going to read them, and I just want you to jot down some notes, whether that's on paper or in your phone. What are the 3 most important factors to me when considering a new job? What obstacles might hold me back from finding a job I love? When do I feel most confident in my life? And if I could wave a magic wand and land my dream job right now, what would that be? So I'm going to kind of pause on this slide. We're going to take no more than 2 minutes and then jump into some Q&A. And I just want you to focus on the one question that's really landing for you right now. So we'll just take another 30 seconds or so here to kind of jot down some thoughts on one of these items that's hitting home for you. Okay. I appreciate you kind of taking a quiet moment to do that, because when we're in these workshops, sometimes we forget to kind of pause and write down what's actually landing for us right now. And that's whatever's coming up for you. It's almost like you're getting intuitive hits. So just write down the things that are coming up for you during this workshop, because that's probably, it might be a good place to start when you get off the call, is all I'll say. So I know we've covered a lot in the first half. We're going to pause for a couple minutes here. Liz is going to moderate some Q&A for us. We'll take some questions, and then we'll dig into the second half after some Q&A. Liz, turning it over to you.
We have questions. And I
Great.
really want to exaggerate what Jennifer just said, which is that when we're spinning in our head, we go down a path of, I can't do this, I don't know how, I don't know what. And yet, when you give yourself permission to really pause and reflect and think, and then take it out of your head and write it down, it becomes concrete. So you're almost writing your elevator pitch, because you're answering questions like, this is what I really want to do. This is what I'm dreaming about. Or this is what I'm already good at. This is where I'm most confident. So even those small things that we really enjoy doing, you have to start thinking about who might pay you to do that. So let me just throw out a couple of the questions, and I'm going to kind of collaborate them together, because a couple questions were about social media. And is it really a hindrance to not have a social media or not have a LinkedIn? What's your thoughts on that?
Oh, I love this question. So there is something, it's called negative online presence. And correct me if I'm wrong, Liz, I think it's called negative online presence. But if you don't have, if I Google you and I can't find you and nothing comes up, that can actually be viewed as a negative by some hiring managers. And I don't know where the statistic comes from, but this is something I've picked up along the way, because I've worked with clients who have no Google search results because either they went to school or they worked before, like, the internet. I mean, I was around when the internet was invented, but I wasn't like through my school or anything. So as things have come up in my life, it's going to end up on the internet, right? But for some people, a lot of their highlights from their career were kind of before the late 90s, when everything was kind of getting online. And so I think there's something to be said about controlling your online presence. I want you to feel whatever you're projecting. Now, remembering, if someone Googles you, it's really all they're going to know. So hiring managers will often Google people and look at the social media, because it can be almost like, not a background check, but it's along those lines, right? It's perfectly acceptable to do that. So I might just encourage you to say, I'm going to have a static page on LinkedIn with just my picture or not a picture, with just some basic information. That way, if somebody Googles you, at least what comes up is what you want them to know. But there is, I believe, it could be a hindrance to some companies, not all, and not everybody has time to look at social media. But I think you have to feel comfortable with the technology. But Liz, do you want to comment on that? Because there is this, if I Google you and I can't find you even on LinkedIn, I might wonder, what you've been doing.
And that's the curiosity, is you should probably Google yourself and see what shows up, because you might have pictures from high school or college, or something old that you want to kind of clarify. And so we do have an option, because now we're living in this COVID world where it's very different than walking into an organization and meeting someone face to face. But it is what I call, it depends. I work with a lot of service providers, and they're not on LinkedIn, whether I'm looking for a plumber or somebody help me with contracting in my house. I also work with people in the entertainment industry or lawyers, and they don't have a social media presence because they don't need it, because they've been working for a long time. But if you're a job seeker and you want people to get to know you and you want them to like you, then having that presence, I think, is something worth exploring. Absolutely.
Could be part of your brand.
Theme of a question that's coming in is suggestions for transitioning from something that you did 20 years ago that you maybe haven't done for a long time, but it's a passion, a hobby, or an interest, or you're going from a corporate environment to maybe a nonprofit environment, or you're shifting and you're pivoting. Any advice for people that are doing a career pivot?
Pivots. Oh, this is great. I just did a pivot workshop recently. So it really, and again, it's the network, it's talking to people, and you don't have to use the word network. Talk to people, have conversations, right? Find people doing what you want to do. And especially for people who, they used to do something, say you're a nurse 20 years ago. Well, you're probably still going to be able to refresh your license or renew your certification to become a nurse again. But the technology has changed in the hospital. You might have different ways of dispensing medication. There's a lot of computer stuff. So what happens is within an industry, the technology changes, maybe the way of doing things has changed and you haven't changed with it. So there is it's good to reconnect with professionals who are doing it now and kind of find out how is it going. And honestly, this is for everybody since 2020. The pandemic changed everything because we are all operating more online. So it's not just you that feels like it's everybody, right? We all had to go from being in an office to being on Zoom like the next day. So you're not alone in this. And I just want to remind people, we all are going through this since 2020 and still going through that shift in terms of the workplace itself. But I would say you've talked to people 20 years. Liz, there was two more things you mentioned about. First, it was coming back after a gap, and then there was a couple more scenarios there. Just remind me.
A bigger change. So
bigger
if you've got
change.
a client who's, she's done hair and makeup in the film business, and now she wants to be a flight attendant on corporate jets. Seems
I
like
love it.
distant.
They seem very disconnected, but this generation in particular is very accepting of the fact that they have a lot of interests. They won't probably change those interests. So over the course of their lifetime, they're looking forward to, and they tell me this, and it's even the millennials and the younger generation, but they expect to have 6 or 7 careers. They don't want to do the same thing for 30 or 40 years. And I know my parents, they did, the same thing, and my grandparents, right? It was, you're in a job for 30 or 40 years, you were a lifer. Okay, that really, very rarely do you find lifers at a job anymore. And it's encouraged. I think it's actually a positive to say, like, I've done all these things, because you become more well-rounded. And there's actually some companies that I would say are more forward and kind of maybe trending, but they understand that makes a person happier, better fulfilled, more well-rounded. Like, it's okay to not just have done one thing. And I think it's, you don't want to be changing jobs, and I'm not encouraging you to jump jobs every year, but there's something to be said about, you've probably already had 1 or 2 careers and pivots, whether you wanted to make those pivots or not. They might have just happened out of necessity. But now you're faced with choosing to make a pivot. And I would say, go for it. Find some support if you need to, kind of make that change, because usually a gradual pivot is more recommended versus just like quitting your job in the office today and starting your own business tomorrow. That's a harder way to do it. But some people, they can do that. It really depends on you.
Yeah. And I think it's important to note that you are unique. Each of you have really unique backgrounds and experiences that you might not think are valuable. Your ability to be bilingual or cross-cultural, or to bring an experience from one industry into a new industry, that's kind of adding value. And yet, for those of us that are at an age where, online databases, LinkedIn, that stuff's difficult, just keep in mind that there are people out there that can help you with that. And it may be reaching out to the high school kid down the block, or the neighbor, or the librarian, and saying, hey, can you help me with this tutorial? Like, how do I figure out how to create a LinkedIn site? And maybe it's a YouTube video, or maybe it's a friend that can help you. So that was another question we had in here. And you're right, it's risky, because you're putting it out, and you're right, it could get hacked, and you could have trouble, and you could make mistakes, but we're all human. And so even reaching out to an employer and saying, hey, I just started my LinkedIn, it's new for me, I'd love your feedback, and be open to growing and learning with some new technology.
Exactly. I think you hit it home there, Liz, and just own it. And like, you don't need to call it out, but most of the people are probably not going to Google you, because time is an issue. But for the most part, Google yourself, see what does come up. And then if you decide you want to share more, it's all kind of your personal brand. But again, there's no requirement, and it's different for everybody. So absolutely, you need to own, and this is where the values comes in. You need to know thyself before you go looking.
Yep. And I think that she's going to answer a handful of questions about filling in that gap, and what can you do now to get you on the road to that next job that's going to build your confidence. So I think we're going to wrap up the questions, but keep throwing the questions in the Q&A, because that's where I'm pulling the questions. So
that's great.
And I will say that Oleg is putting a post out that says there's a whole LinkedIn program that the library has done. So definitely Google that, because the library is there to support you with that.
Great. And LinkedIn, of course, it's your online resume. So if you do your LinkedIn, by the way, your resume is essentially done. You can just put it onto, into a document. So when you do one of these things, remember it overlaps. The work is, it's going to save you time on another end. So it is a valuable exercise, or it can be. So thanks, Liz, and great questions, everybody. I love the kind of wheels turning in real time, because it is so unique for everybody, but there is a lot of overlap. So we'll talk about the overlap in the second half of our workshop, but great questions. Keep them in the chat box. We're going to dive into Next, why career gaps happen. And I might just need to restart my slides here. This kind of got paused. Let's see. Okay, there we go. Why career gaps happen. So we're going to dive right in. And one of the most common reasons this happens is actually childcare or family responsibilities, caring for family members, caring for a spouse with a medical issue or an aging parent, right? This is a really, I put it number one because oftentimes it is number one. And unfortunately, it tends to impact one parent more than the other parent. So when we talk about career gaps, there is kind of some groups are more affected than others. And if you had a baby, you might have a harder time getting back to the workforce just because A, childcare is expensive. B, your family might live too far away to help out. There's a lot of, things that happen with family requirements. And those are really important. Those are important seasons of your life. And you shouldn't have to kind of take time off from work to do that, but ultimately it's just kind of the nature of unfortunately, some of our economic circumstances. But that's one of the most common reasons. Of course, this was big problem in 2020 when the pandemic happened and childcare centers and things were closed or kids had to be homeschooled and things like that. So this has become a very big thing in the last couple of years. Being laid off or losing your job, whether that was 5 years ago or in the pandemic, is also a top reason. And the same goes for burnout. I think I have burnout toward the bottom there, but again, these are I want to say, very common since 2020, but they can happen at any point in your career. I had several teachers, healthcare professionals find me last year because they just said, 2020 was just like the hardest, worst year of my career. I just can't go back to what I was doing. And it was those people that pivoted from, for instance, being a teacher to being an occupational therapist, right? They're just completely said, I'm doing a 180. That's what I call a 180, right? So some of these things just become not sustainable. You just say, whether it was the pandemic or I'm just done. Like I've just been doing this for the first 10, 20 years of my life. It's okay to have another career. You don't have to do what you went to school for forever. You don't have to do something that you're not enjoying, right? So these are all very common themes. Retirement is also a big one. I was excited to read an article a couple of days ago on LinkedIn, and it was about research that shows that 1 in 6 retired individuals are contemplating a return to work, which I thought was amazing. Okay, that's a really high number, 1 in 6. And it's also amazing because when you're in that second half of life, you have so much more experience and wisdom to share that these companies really do need that, right? There's so much, so much that you can offer. So you might have decided my first career ended and now I'm bored in my retirement, or I want to earn money again, or I just have more to give. I have interests, I have talents and time, and it's really never too late. Success, of course, can come at any age. And even if you're not seeking a level of success in doing something next, it's always a good time, right? You might start a business, you might do something that makes an impact. You might say, I want to leave a legacy. I've worked and I've kind of had my career, but I want to make a difference now and in a different way. So it's really never too late. But I love seeing that statistic because retirement is a big reason that career gaps also happen. And sometimes it's 5, 10 years or more you've been retired. And maybe it's usually about 5 is what I'm reading. But at that point, you kind of realize, hey, I might live another 30 years, right? I mean, we're living a long time. So it's all being factored into staying active, staying engaged, and really being fulfilled. And work is a primary way that we do kind of get that fulfillment. So I love seeing that statistic. But other reasons, going back to school, maybe you started a business, maybe you had a bad manager. A lot of people quit their jobs because of their manager, not the job. So people leave bosses, they don't always leave jobs. So sometimes that's a thing for you, and it wasn't the right company, it wasn't the right, it wasn't the right fit is what it comes down to. But it's really never too late. So how do you reframe your employment gap? Well, I will say it starts up here, okay? It starts in your head. It's all about your mindset. And I want to call this out because we tend to, I think Liz mentioned it, but we don't always pause and take a moment to really reflect. We just kind of operate and we're on autopilot and we're going through the daily, and we never really step back and kind of honor these moments. In a break or a career gap is kind of something that we need to sort out in our minds so that when we share it with people, we feel good about it. If you don't feel good about how you spent your time off, or even if you can't speak to it confidently, right, in your elevator pitch, you need to be able to reframe that in your head so that you can speak to it and feel positive, right? Or at least feel it was necessary. But I want you to kind of spend some time, especially since the pandemic, everybody lived through that. So more than ever, I will say employers are understanding of any gap, because we do need workers to return to work, and we need good people to come back to work. So for all the reasons we talked about of why you maybe left, it's a really good time to come back, regardless of how long you've been gone. And that's just because these gaps have become more normalized in the last couple of years. So it's good for you, but you do need to feel confident. One of the exercises I do with my clients is actually work on the elevator pitch. And sometimes we spend a whole session really nailing it down, because again, if you're struggling to relay your experience, or you feel bad for whatever reason about this time you were away from work, or you don't feel good about it, you need to really rewrite the elevator pitch in your head and therefore on paper. So it is a good exercise to go through. It might take you 30 minutes or an hour, but then going forward, you'll be able to speak to this time off with confidence. So if you were unemployed for, say, the last 5 years, instead, maybe you need to spin it like, okay, I chose to take that time off because I had 2 young kids. I chose to be home with them until they went to kindergarten. I chose to take time off to care for my spouse who had a medical issue. I chose to take care of my aging parent in the last years of their life. Okay, so maybe you chose to do any of those things, travel, school, whatever the reason, that's a choice. And I think when you frame it in your head, like I chose this time, maybe it happened to me, maybe I was laid off, but then I chose to not go back to work. I chose really to not look for a job and kind of stay in this place and do something else with that time. Whatever the reason was that you took time off, it really doesn't matter, but you need to spin it for yourself before you can spin it for anybody else. The examples are unique. One thing I want you to take away from this session is, the time you were away from work was valid for you. Maybe you had the luxury of taking time off to stay home with your kids or care for a family member. That is a little bit of a luxury, right? But maybe it was also just pure necessity. There was no one else who could do it. You stepped up. Okay. And those are the things that you need to say with confidence. There was nobody in my family to step up. And so I moved 1,000 miles across the country to take care of my mom, and I wouldn't change a thing. Okay. So whatever that is for you, I just want you to know your reason is valid. And if you need help spinning it, I would encourage you to write your elevator pitch down and then rewrite it and make it sound more positive and make it sound like you own it. Okay. Because you do need to feel that you can share your story, and it's completely okay. And ever since 2020, like I said, they've become more normalized. So I want you to focus instead on what you were doing and how you spent that time, maybe what you learned, maybe the highlights. I think it will be a good exercise for you if you're struggling. So ways to boost your confidence. If you've taken any period of time off work, it's important to re-engage somehow. One of the ways we'll talk about is volunteering. I think it's a great way to get experience on your resume if you've been out of work for a while. FYI, you can volunteer online now. I just learned this a couple weeks ago. You can find remote volunteer opportunities online on LinkedIn. There are a few sites we can either drop into the chat, maybe Liz, if you want to drop in. Just the volunteermatch.org is a big one. And laworks.com for folks in LA also has a lot of opportunities. LinkedIn, Instagram, any of these sites, whatever social media you're on, they pretty much all have a way you can search. And for instance, LA Works, you can even search by experience. You can put in your education level. You can check the box for 55 and over, meaning they're looking for people with your experience and your wisdom. There are literally countless gigs online or in person to volunteer. I'm going to show you some samples next, but I also want to mention truly something for everyone. Food pantries, churches, animal shelters, Chamber of Commerce, anything in your community that you're kind of involved with or you want to get involved with, just say, hey, I have some extra time. I want to get involved. How can I help? The possibilities are really endless. If you have ideas that I'm kind of not thinking of here, feel free to drop those into the chat and your peers can see those today. But this is a great way to boost your confidence. The other items here, take a class. I mean, you can take, and I've done this, you can take classes at an Ivy League university at Harvard for free. This is something that kept me busy during some slow days during the pandemic. I love classes. And so you can have access to some of these great programs 100% for free on the internet. So it's really a great benefit. LinkedIn has courses, Coursera, Udemy, etc. You could also find a mentor, coach, someone to check in with for guidance that really can help your confidence level there, especially if you work on your elevator pitch, your resume, and all of those pieces will come together and you'll just feel much more confident as you go forward. Self-care, I want to highlight, I'm big into self-care because this process it's very draining. And I think it's important to take some time for yourself and have a plan. Like, I'm going to dedicate these blocks of time to my job search and networking. And then I'm going to dedicate these blocks of time to my hobbies and my recreation, right? And during the hobbies and recreation, you're still networking with people you like, and you might find jobs that way too. But the point is really to really restore your energy there, because it is very draining. And the fake it till you make it, I put on there because it's a lot of times we feel we're not sure, like we have everything ready to go, but we just need to do it. Like, you just need to get out of your comfort zone. These are just some sample volunteer opportunities I just happened to see in the last few days, so I put them up. They may or may not be filled, but you can see they're from LA Works. A couple of them are from Instagram. One I thought was interesting on LinkedIn. It's through Volunteer Match, but if you're a skier, and I know we've got some skiers on here, great snow right now, you can actually volunteer to go to Mammoth Mountain on a weekend and be a volunteer ski instructor. And I thought that was just a really cool, like, you might be doing that already, and then you could actually put it on your resume. So I really love the quality of volunteering these days. It's so different than even volunteering 10 years ago, because it's really like, there's wellness, there's art days, you can be, art teacher. There's just so many ways to get involved. And there really is something for everyone. So make your free time count. And our last couple minutes here, I just want to give you kind of the takeaway. And again, you're going to get these slides in email, so you don't need to write it down, but this is really what we're giving you, and what we've prepared for you today is really step one. I think and I hope our goal was to give you this workshop and give you the step one. Okay, we gave you the strategy. It's pretty comprehensive. It's a great way to commence your return to work search. And you now have this knowledge and framework to begin. The rest is truly up to you. And though there are 7 steps on here, again, begin where you are. But at some point, you'll need to get in touch with your vision. You'll need to be specific about what you're looking for and what you need. And again, it's during this season of your life, and it will change. You'll need to be able to speak to your experience, including the employment gap. And you're going to need to find your tribe. There is a tribe for everybody, whether that's on Instagram or in your local community. That networking is fun. It's enjoyable when you're around people you like. It doesn't feel like you're networking. It just feels like you're having genuine conversations with people you'd like to get to know better. And that's what it should feel like. Lastly, please be bold. Liz and I will always say this, but really nobody cares more about your career than you do. Like, we care because this is what we do for a living, but for the most part, nobody, you're the one that needs to drive this. So we hope that you'll get back in touch with why you're an asset and really find people doing what you would like to do, and kind of go forward from here. But we hope that you've gotten something out of our time today. We still have plenty of time for questions. Liz and I are here to help if you need us. I'm just going to put our contact information up if I can, so you can take a screenshot. If you need to jump off the call or you want to take a break or grab some water, do what you need to do. But we're going to stick around for at least another, it looks like 15, 20 minutes for Q&A. But I want to put this up. Feel free to take a screenshot. Again, you're going to get these slides in email. But I want you to reach out if you have questions, and I want you to find me on LinkedIn if you like to connect. It just kind of start with us, right? This is networking 101, in terms of what we're available for: coaching, career checkups, and that sort of thing. Liz, before we jump into the Q&A, is there anything you'd like to add to kind of close out our workshop? I feel like we covered a lot, so I appreciate everybody's endurance. I know I was really trying to give you a comprehensive framework, and I hope that we've been able to do that.
You know what? I think you packed it, and you've got some fan mail coming in because people are saying, wow, this is really helpful. And it is helpful because it's kind of the $10,000 view from the top. But I like what you said about start where you are. If writing your resume is going to boost your confidence, then start there. If reaching out to a friend is going to boost your confidence, start there. Because so many people have thrown in the chat, it's been a long time since I've worked.
It's been a long time.
So what if we dread networking? What if we are nervous about this? And I would say one small step, maybe commit to doing one thing after this call, whether that's calling one friend or signing up for one course. And so I was going to say some of the questions on here are things like, how long should you volunteer, and should you add volunteering to your resume? Do you want to answer a couple of those questions?
Sure, I think it's fine. And Liz, you can comment on the resume too, but I would add it, especially if you don't have anything else recent, and say, hey, I took time off from paid work, but I've been volunteering. And I also, run the soup kitchen at my church every Sunday. And I do my kids, I'm a coach for their volleyball. I mean, even if you don't put it on your resume, be prepared. And this is the pitch, be prepared to share it with the person when you're networking, because then they'll say, hey, wow, you should talk to so-and-so. There's a job you might be great at. So it's be able to speak to it confidently and put some of it on the paper if you don't have anything, for sure.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the best ways to fill the gap is to start doing something. So if you do start taking a course and you're halfway through the course, you could put the coursework on your resume. And
exactly.
Even if, volunteering at your kid's school has nothing to do with your work, what that shows is caring and compassion. And really what we're trying to do is give you the confidence to get out there. And as you start volunteering with other volunteers, you may find that there's somebody else who can help you on your job search. So
absolutely. It's a great way to network. I mean, volunteering is a great way to network because you're giving your time. You're not asking for anything. It really is a win. It really is a win-win. And like, you might get jobs out of it, like you said, from meeting people who are kind of in the same space.
Right. A few more questions kind of digging in, what about personal things, what about the gaps that are heart-wrenching? People have cancer, and how do you keep it positive?
That's a tough one. And I think it comes down to, and I would say, like, it may be a lifetime that you're processing what happened. It's not something you get over. I think you just continue to move forward, right? You get through, but there's things that will be really hard to share. But I think what you should maybe focus on, or what I would work with my clients to focus on, is what's the next thing, right? Saying, hey, this happened to me. I went through that, but here's what it prompted me to do next. I actually decided that I'm going to seize the day. I'm going to go and I'm going to change my career, or I'm going to decide to do something that I've wanted to do for 15 years. I've wanted to get certified to be a yoga instructor. And it prompted you to action, right? I think it's important to say, like, yes, it happened, but don't spend all your time there. Focus on what happened next. How did it change you? How did it make you re-engage? How did it make you be more intentional with your time? Since COVID, we've all, and I don't want to keep restating 2020, but so much of that is relevant to what I do with my clients, because we all want to be more intentional with our time. It was this great pause, and it made us, I think most people, I hope, reflect on, what do I want to do now? Because time is very precious. So these things that happen, I would probably spin it that way. And Liz, feel free to chime in there, because it does make you think, and it does make you do things differently going forward.
Absolutely. And we're all different. We all have different skills, different experience. So there's a question in here about, what if you're an introvert? Pointers for those that are really struggling.
And this was an introvert question. It kind of muted me for a second. It might have been the cloud. So if you're an introvert, how do you network? Is that the question?
Yeah, I kind of put a couple questions together because there seems to be a theme of people who are a little anxious, and maybe they're feeling very isolated. So they're really having to take just one small step.
Yeah, I think, I'm actually an introvert, and people won't believe that because I'm presenting. But when I get off this call, I will need like 8 hours of quiet to kind of restore my energy. But it doesn't, introvert, extrovert, it can help with networking. But for the most part, if you're finding people who are like you, then those people are also introverts. So maybe you're in a chess club, maybe you're in, whatever your kind of network circle is, that's where you probably feel comfortable. I would have you ask yourself the question, when did I feel confident? When did I feel comfortable speaking to people? And go back to that period in your life, or whatever that situation was. Put yourself in that situation of, when's an example in my life that I actually could talk to people and I felt confident? And think about what you were doing in that time that made you feel that way. And hopefully it will bring some qualities up that you maybe forgot you had, or it will maybe get the wheels turning. Does that make sense? I don't know if that was as clear as I wanted it to be.
No, I think that's great advice. And I think that certainly, one small step, whether it's starting to leave the house, and what does that look like for you? And there's another question in here, what about if you haven't talked to somebody in a really long time and you're not sure they're going to give you a positive past recommendation? And, one of my thoughts on that is, maybe just check in, maybe
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge that we didn't leave on the best of terms and you weren't in the
Mm-hmm.
best situation.
Mm-hmm.
I was coaching a client who quit one job to take a higher paid job. And when she went in to give the 2 weeks notice, they were completely shocked and they were angry
Oh,
and they were
wow.
upset. They were losing a
Yeah.
family member that they thought was
Yeah.
happy. And by then
Mm-hmm.
she wasn't in a position to renegotiate. So she's a little nervous calling them back up. But I said, well,
Mm-hmm.
if you explain what was going on and why you made those decisions and just check in, one of two things can happen. Either they can
Mm-hmm.
embrace you and want to know what's going on, or you validate that maybe you
Mm-hmm.
a bridge, all those past employers and past around and check in on them. How are they
Mm-hmm.
doing? Because this
Mm-hmm.
is a universal COVID gap that we've all had.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're not alone out there. There's 158 people on the call that are all in this same boat.
Mm-hmm. And I think everybody loves, sometimes hearing from people, blasts from the past. It's less of a thing now because of Facebook and all these sites where you kind of know where people are, even if you haven't been in contact with them. But I would say, start where you're comfortable. Start with the person you're comfortable with first, and then that will give you kind of confidence to move forward to the next one. But begin where you're comfortable. Absolutely. And if you're not comfortable in person, then go on Instagram and follow all the people that you believe in what they're doing, their brand, their business, and just message them on Instagram and comment and get involved in the chat there. That's still networking. And I know people who've gotten jobs off Instagram. It sounds like it's just it's a new way to get jobs that we're all still learning, but you can get in these comments and DMs and kind of build relationships on social media. And if you're comfortable not leaving your computer, that's a good way to do it. And there are, there's just something for everybody. So find your thing.
I love that. I definitely want to hone in on that. There is something for everyone. Everybody has a job that they can do. And that's the curiosity, is whether you have a disability, whether you've been 20 years out, whether ageism, there's something you can do. And part of that is finding your people. There's somebody in the chat who said, well, what if my background is volunteering at a political organization, knocking on doors, putting political stuff out there? People are going to think I'm a nut job or I'm crazy. And I'm like, well, then they're not your people.
They're not your people. Yeah.
And you need to let those people go. And sometimes
you could volunteer, and this is just a thought, I'm going to interject, but if that's your background, you know who's running for city office in my community, who's running for city council, mayor, offer to be their campaign manager. Give yourself a big title. They probably will take the free help, because you do need people to keep you organized with the door knocking and the campaign mailers. And you could probably network yourself into a job just by offering, because they're, on tight budgets, especially at the city level, if you're wanting to be in that space. Now, if you want to do something different, that's fine. But I would say give yourself that title of campaign manager and volunteer to get involved with someone. And that could lead to a paid job. And again, if you're struggling with what your space is, reach out to us and just, send me a message and say, hey, actually, I'm really struggling with this, because I promise you there's a tribe for you.
Yep. I think the one that comes to mind to me is a real estate agent, or somebody who needs things dropped off, or, it's a little bit of taking the job search and pivoting it to be your choice. And I love how you said you have an option and a choice of how you reframe what this time off was. You can go negative, I was laid off, unemployed, staying home, or positive, I was learning new skills, taking care of family, getting healthy again. And so we have to reframe it in our mind, and then ask ourselves, who's out there in the world that I want to help? Who's out there in the world that needs my help? And maybe start small a little bit. And then, as somebody put in the chat, what if I don't trust them? Then don't go to work for them.
Then don't know. Yeah.
Look for the good
Probably
people
not
out
where
there
you feel comfortable. Yeah.
Keep throwing questions in
I'm going to peek into the Q&A as well.
Yes, the bouncing between the chat and the Q&A. And I think you've covered a lot of the questions that came in earlier. Must you have a question for the employer during an interview? Do you want to prep that one?
I say yes. I say have 3 prepared. I always they run out of time and you get to ask one question. So make it your number one. But I always have 3 prepared. And the reason is it's mutual. Okay. So the interview is about you. Are you a good fit? Will you get the job? But you're also interviewing them. And you might go to this interview and you show up 10 minutes early, and this is just who you are, and you have your resume and you're very organized, and then the person makes you wait 10, 20 minutes. Oh, they're something, a meeting ran over, but you're interviewing them. So you need to pay attention to what's kind of happening in the environment. And then you might go into the interview and they say, oh, I don't have your resume. Do you have a copy? I haven't looked at it. These are red flags maybe for you. So the reason I have questions is because when I actually get to the point where I can ask a question, it's because I really want to know. I'm trying to assess, is this a fit for me? And especially now with my clients, I say, is this really a fit for you? Because we get and I don't want to use the word desperate. It's not the most positive connotation, but we do kind of get fearful. Oh my gosh, I really need this job, or I really want this job. But it's okay during the job interview to realize it's not a good fit for me. Because if you take that job and you're miserable and you get stuck in it, it would not be a good scenario. And then you have to kind of get out of it. So I really want to encourage you to go with your intuition there and say, if there's things coming up that it's not the right fit, or you ask questions and it's not the answer you were hoping for, you need to really think about whether this is going to be a sustainable job for you. Not any job is going to be, you don't want any job. You want a right fit job for you and a right fit job for them. And when it's the right fit, you'll get the job because it's meant to be yours. And it's almost like finding the right house or finding the right partner in life. When it's meant to be, you just kind of know, and it just happens. And so ask those questions. And I love those questions because I always ask, this is one I often use, and you're welcome to use it. I just say, what keeps you engaged in your job, especially if they've been there a while? I ask, why do you come to work for this company? And sometimes they say things to me like, oh, well, I had, free this or that. And I'm thinking, if you came here because of the perks, that's also kind of a red flag for me. Like, maybe it's not the company culture I want. So again, it's personal, but those are questions I would definitely ask, because you need to find out if it's right for you.
Yeah, I think Oleg and I did an interview prep. And I always tell my clients, there's $1 million question. And the question is, what exactly are you looking for?
Mm-hmm.
And you need to ask those employers, because if you're looking for a job and you see, you're just, I recommend people walk your neighborhood, go to the Locust retail neighborhood, because if those employers need help, they're going to put a sign in the window that says help wanted. But if you walk in the door, you should be asking, well, what exactly do you need help with? And if they say, oh, well, it's a restaurant and we need food delivery from 10 o'clock at night till 1 o'clock in the morning, and you don't have a car, you might not want to do that. But asking them, what do they need help with? Maybe they just need help cleaning up, or maybe they need a hostess, or maybe they need, somebody to work part-time just on the weekends. And that could be your foot in the door. It's a part-time job that kind of gets you started. So there's a
great
question in the chat that I think was great, because somebody said, well, what about recruitment agencies, or, are there any employment agencies that are more gap friendly? Any thoughts on working with agencies?
Well, you might speak to this a little bit more, because I think in terms of agencies, and it sort of depends on career level sometimes. I mean, you can get, I guess, a quote headhunter. If you have maybe a background and you were like, you had a certain level of experience, you could probably get a headhunter and somebody who can help you get a job if that's what you want. Agencies, I wasn't sure if the person was referring to like temp agencies or things specific to Los Angeles. I wouldn't be able to speak to those in particular at this call. But I think maybe Liz has more insight here as well, because it couldn't hurt, if you're not, but it really depends, I guess, on your particular situation.
Yeah, when I work with private clients that are expecting to earn 100,000, 200,000, we do work with recruiters, because recruiters work at that level. But there's something to be said about temp agencies. And I tell my clients, think about where you want to work, and then maybe ask that company or that organization, what agencies do you use?
That's great.
I was recently at an event at the LA Convention Center, and they hired a lot of extras for events. And I've also been to stadiums, and there's a brand new stadium here in Los Angeles, and they may need help at events. Now, granted, you'll be standing 8 hours a day. So you have to be careful and ask them, well, what exactly would I be doing? And is this freelance part-time, temp agency job, is that going to open up doors for me? I'm going to meet people or learn new skills. So is that a good fit for me, is a really great question. But the tricky thing is who cares more about the job, you or the employment agency? And the answer is you. So starting to really figure out where do I want to go, and then who gets hired there and how do they get hired there is a really important question to start asking. Yeah. Somebody said, what about asking about salary and benefits during an interview? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I used to say, sometimes honestly now they tell you first because they don't want to waste their time. And this is, I think, honestly, been since the pandemic. I see it posted a lot more. I believe even in California, our governor is trying to pass some legislation to make the salaries more transparent. So they might actually, if it's a public company, especially have to post, and some of them posted anyway, the range or the salary just straight. But I think we're going to see also as we go forward more of this being shared because you're trying to eliminate any gender gap or any gaps. And so I think the transparency around pay is a thing. I tend to not ask about it at the first round because I don't even know if I want the job. And if I do, I need to understand what the job is before I know what I would want to be paid for it. So again, it depends. And a lot of times if you're with a recruiter or you see a job posted, the salary might be included, or they may say, hey, does this work for you? Because you have a lot of experience, this is all it pays. And it's because they don't want to even take you through this long interview process that might last several panelists or several people. So they tend to bring it up first in my recent, last couple of years is what my clients are telling me is they'll bring it up first. But I personally, I don't bring it up in the first because I want to think about it. I want to get off the call. I want to think, what is this, how much is this going to be worth to me? What are the other benefits that might be involved? So it's a personal choice. There's no right or wrong, but
Yeah.
it really does depend.
Yeah. And it is a little bit about doing your research, doing your homework,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
reaching out to other people that are doing similar jobs and asking them
Mm-hmm.
what's the range. And
Mm-hmm.
Oleg is here to help us out. He just posted that in California it is labor law 43.2.3 that says that employers with more than 15 employees must list the salary range.
Great.
So,
Okay. Well, I thought I heard something like that recently.
yep.
Oleg for the win. Okay.
And,
January 1st. Okay. All right. So I'm not too far behind.
exactly.
I definitely think that's huge. That's huge.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it shouldn't be a surprise. If you have done your due diligence with a job posting or job research, it's not going to be a surprise what it pays. You pretty much, you should know. And I always tell people have your aspirational figure, like the top number you want, and then have your bottom number, what's the minimum you'll take, and then pretty much hope for something in the middle. That's really the workable number. But I always say have three numbers.
Yeah. And I always say have a package. Have it like
Mhm.
money's not the most important thing.
It's
What are
not.
the hours? What are the benefits? What am I
Yeah.
going to learn? How is this going to make me a better person? And you may start small and just sort of get your foot in the door and shake
Mhm.
off the cobwebs at a low paying job that just gets you started. And then that confidence goes on your resume, and then you can take that experience and go somewhere else. So
Exactly. No, that's
yeah.
great advice.
These are great questions. And I know that you and I are passionate about careers and passionate that there's a job for everybody out there. And so this is what we love to do. And I want to thank Oleg for giving us the opportunity to present. And I'm going to bring him back on screen to kind of close us out. And he's also going to send out a survey and an evaluation. So let us know what you like about us and come find us on LinkedIn. Oleg.
Thank you very much, Jennifer and Liz. That was a very information-rich program, and I like the way that you took us through the values part and then the part that's specific to employment gaps. That was really good, and I just want to let the folks out there know we're going to have more programs just like this one, covering the questions that you want to know about careers every Tuesday at 11 o'clock moving forward. So reserve that time in your schedule, Tuesdays at 11 o'clock. And of course, if you can't make it, that's okay too. Register and then we'll send you the video link by email. So, so I just want to let you know a few of the programs that we have coming up next week. We have Exploring Job Search Websites, Tuesday at 11. The following week, Liz returns with Allison Arnoff, who's an executive coach. She's going to be taking us through communication skills in a virtual workplace. And then to round off March and the 28th, Tuesday at 11, we're going to have a screening of Driven. It's a limited series featuring two local entrepreneurs, a real estate agent and a fashionpreneur, who are doing their thing. And we're going to show those episodes, and then we're going to be able to talk to them. So that's going to be March 28th at 11 o'clock. So you can always go to lacountylibrary.org/workready and find all that information, sign up for all of those programs. And Liz mentioned that I'm going to ask you for your opinion. I'm going to ask you for your feedback. We absolutely love your feedback. Let me put the link to our Work Ready page so that people can just go there right away. And then I'm also going to post a link to the survey. So we sent out a very short survey. The survey asks for your feedback on this program and also what you want to learn in the future. So definitely, if you do anything, let us know what you want to hear about in the future. These programs are meant to be responsive. We want to give you what you need. So here is a link to the post-event survey. And look out for my email probably early next week. Jennifer and Liz's emails will be on there also, and they have a little survey for you as well if you want to fill that out. That's going to come in the follow-up email. All right. Thanks again, Jennifer, Liz, and thank you all for
Thank you.
being out there with us. We really, really appreciate your presence here, and we hope to see you next time.